You're listening to the God Life Culture Podcast, where faith
and what's trending collide. Welcome to the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. This is Eddie.
What's up, everyone? This is Miguel, and we are super excited that you are tuned in to the God Life Culture Podcast. Listen, if you are a returning listener, you are probably wondering what is happening right now.
Or watcher, really. Maybe the listeners can pick up on it a little bit.
If you watch us and watch our visuals, right, you're probably like, okay, like, is this the right podcast? Like, what's happening?
Yes. I mean, we decided to be a nature podcast moving forward now. No, we're on location. A lot of churches do this. They have like family retreats, like men, women, youth retreats and camps. And we're currently on location at our men's camp, which is out on an island. Sounds very like exotic or very
Shelter Island.
It's Shelter Island. All at the end of Long Island.
Yeah.
But it's like pretty cool. Like we're here on location and we decided to bring you guys in with us on this experience as well, at least visually, because it's always great to have a good background.
Yeah.
And just to speak a little bit about that experience and what camp is and all of that. Mm-hmm. So welcome to Camp Quinepet.
Yeah, and if this is your first time watching and listening, we are not in our normal space.
Yes.
Right? But thank you for tuning in and checking out the God Life Culture Podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you are listening to us so you can make sure you get notified every time we drop a new episode. Yes. But yes, it is cool to be doing this, right? Kind of the first time we record outside of like a normal room environment. You know what I mean? So it's, pretty cool to do something like this and have this scenery and backdrop, right? So, of course, because we're doing this, if you hear some wind,
true.
If you hear some yelling,
some birds,
if there's a boat that passes by, you're going to see that, right?
Yeah.
But we are, like Eddie said, out in nature for this episode.
Yeah, so on that topic of nature and camp, I think that there's a lot of things about it that people love.
Yeah.
And there's other things that people find a little not as loving about the camp experience. Is there anything that you like when you think of camp, you're like, I'm looking forward to that, and not that as much for some other things?
Yeah, I agree that there are people, right, that have their different views on camp and all of that. For me, I am the type of person that I definitely enjoy getting away. I definitely enjoy like being in a different environment for, a weekend, right? So I'll go down the list of things I enjoy. How about that? Right? So for one, the camps I've been have been mostly like youth camps, right? This is actually the first men's camp that I'm actually able to go to, right? That I am here, right? But for me, I think I definitely like the experience of just like a lot of people coming together, right? So a lot of people coming together. Obviously, when it's a Christian church camp, right, everyone there is like kind of on the same page, right? They're there with the purpose of having church, having services, and there's conferences and just being with each other. And I remember growing up in the youth camps, just, when you go with your friends and you have kind of your people there, it's like, you stay up late and you're talking and, different things like that. So I definitely love the community aspect, right, of a camp and kind of what that, brings about. And I think it's also great to just do something that you normally do at home in your comfort zone, right? And doing it somewhere else, right? So I think that's one of the beauties about camp or like going on a retreat is the idea that, we worship God in our churches. We worship God with other people, kind of on a regular basis, you know what I mean? And it can become routine. It can become something that you're used to and something that you may at times take advantage, you know what I mean, of that blessing that you have to do that. But when you have a camp, you're able to do those things, right? And worship with people and have church and listen to a message or a preaching or sermon, be taught, have a conference in a different environment that's not the norm. So I think that alone is also very cool and sometimes necessary to like give you an oomph, you know what I mean? Like just kind of like revive, just that engagement and that interest again. So what do you think? What are some things when you think of camp? Because you love camp.
Supposedly. No.
Right. So as you can tell from and we'll get into, some of my
reservations.
Yes, regarding camp. But you're going to see the energy shift just a little bit, right?
So I love it. No,
right.
I think that I agree with a lot of the things that you're saying. I think that one of the things that I really like is like the mindset of people switch up, and I think that it comes with the scenery change. You see that specifically a lot in women's camp. You see that specifically a lot in youth camp as well, where it's like people go with this desire and this need for a different closeness to God. So whether it is that they are seeking certain answers, or they have a petition, or they're like, you know what, this weekend I'm just gonna like really give 100 because I don't really give 100 back at home, you definitely feel a sense and a shift in the worship, in the services, in those like very like spiritual moments. There's definitely a shift, which I love, because to be able to experience that and to be in a room with people that are fully committed to being like, we're gonna try to like really tap into like God and his presence. I think it's awesome.
Why do you think that is, that people kind of have like that shift in mindset where like a weekend away like that kind of brings about a focus of wanting to get closer to God or having certain things be answered?
I think it's just the shift of it. I think that you have the ability to tap into each and every one of those things during your weekday services, whether it's on a Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, or whatever. And because of the routine of that, I think people lose the understanding that those moments are still as powerful, if not even more powerful. But when you're shifted and you're in this mindset of camp, and you're going to camp and the scenery is different, it kind of like puts things in perspective of, you know what, I'm just going to take advantage of the time. Like I had to drive all the way out there. I had to get on a bus for a certain amount of hours. We're here already. So it's kind of like people seize the opportunity, where at home they kind of take that for granted.
Yeah. And I feel like it's also the idea, like at home, again, everything is right there. You go to your church, you have your home, you have like, you have your routine. It's Sunday. I got to get up. I have to do this. I think when you have a camp that you're going to, or a retreat, there's more of a preparation that takes place beforehand. You know what I mean? So it's like you have to pack. You have to pack certain things. You have to buy certain things. You have to actually travel. Normally retreats and camps, right? They're like 3-4 hours away, sometimes 2 hours, right? So there's more of a effort that's being put in to actually arrive and get there. And I think for certain people that says a lot. It's like, Lord, I'm packing up my stuff, I'm on my way, I'm going there with a particular purpose, a specific reason, and they just have that hope that God is going to meet them there.
Yeah, and I think that if we flip the switch and we start talking about like things that aren't my most favorite about camp, I think about two. The first one is I have to share my space with people.
Yeah, that's the big thing. That's the big thing.
So it's like that idea of, I could be social. I could be, play with like games with people and competitions. I'm in charge of color wars at the youth camp. Like, listen, I can mingle. But it's something about when you're getting ready and you kind of like bumping elbows with people. It's kind of like, all right, I need my own space.
Right. Or just like the scheduling, because now you're all sharing a space. You're all sharing 2 bathrooms, let's say. So it's like, okay, you showering now, showering later, you bathroom now, bathroom later. You probably are the person like, I shower every morning when I wake up, and every night before I go to sleep. So it's like you may not be able to do that exactly how you do it back at home. So the accommodations at times can be rough for the individuals like me,
and depending on location too. Like we've experienced different spots and locations for camps. I've done like the very like rural, very like leaving you to fend yourself type of camps, and then I've done camps that are like really like different
like
quality, and I've literally done camps at hotels. But then like I remember like the one we did last year, I thought like room wise was pretty good as well. But it's I think it's also part of the fun, it's part of the bonding, and as long as everyone is understanding and respectful for each other, at the end of the day, we've never had any issues. Like, we speak about the inconvenience of having to share spaces with people, but then when you actually sit back and reflect, it's like I didn't have no issues. It was pretty fine.
And there are people that like the closeness. There are people that like the idea of like, oh yeah, we're all together all the time, every day. You know what I mean? For these 3 days, we're gonna be together, and there are people that like that. And then there are people that have a preference of just kind of like, I just need my space. But I think camps, they offer that opportunity, right, for people. So it's almost like a successful camp, an effective camp, camp should have time allotted, right? Where it's like these are, group activities that we're doing, everyone together.
Yeah.
And then there are moments where you have some free time to do something on your own.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Very true.
And I think that even those moments where you're on your own, right, is even just a moment where God can meet you and speak to you.
True.
You know what I mean? And in the camps that we've been to, right, and experience, we kind of will see that, right? We'll see like the groups together. We'll see the person that's just taking a walk, the person that's just by the lake, And like you said earlier, I think it's just a moment where people come together and really just have that moment with God where they're just like, I have these questions, I have these worries, I have these concerns, this is on my mind. And again, there's just something about being in a different space, something about being with other people that's encouraging. You know what I mean? And that's definitely something that we should take advantage of when given the opportunity.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first camp, like when you first went to the camp, like what that experience was like?
I do. I think it was my first time. I was 18, I think it was. And it was a lot of youth. And this was one of the nicer ones that maybe spoiled me for others that were coming in the future. But it's really like one of the things that I always remember from those experiences is what we call like the chelchas or the charlas, the conversations after the services. Like, naturally people will like gravitate into like groups and or people will like come into our room and like all have like this powwow and this conversation on like what God did individually for people during certain services. There were people that felt God like never felt him before, people that were waiting on certain words that received those words. And I'm talking about 13, 14, 15, 16, like young people that were sharing these experiences and having these conversations, which to me at 18, was fairly new outside of my circle. Obviously in your church circle with your group, it's different. Like if that's part of your culture, you kind of like talk about little things here and there, but being in a group with like people that aren't your peeps, that are open and willing to share about their experience and their encounter with God and that weekend and things that were leading up to that weekend, situations that they were going through. I think that those are the moments that I was like, man, like this is what it's about. Like, yeah, the color wars are fun, and yes, the services, if you take advantage of them, are powerful as well. But when you have those moments of fellowship and conversation between people of your age group and like dudes getting together, for example, having those conversations, I think it's important. And those are the life-changing moments that people walk away with.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I remember, the first camp I went to wasn't a camp that our church had, put on. But I remember it was, pretty big, organization. And yeah, that's the wind. We hear that. It's a pretty big organization that, put that camp together. And I just remember for me, I was like 12 years old, I think it was. And I just remember the amount of youth that were in that room. That to me, it was like, I remember them saying like there was like over 1,000 people in like one of the nights that had gone there. And I remember it was just mind blowing to me that there were actually 1,000 youth out there. You know what I mean? Because sometimes I think one of the biggest things is as young Christians, right, is that you feel alone. You feel like you're the only one that's kind of like living this life. You're the only one that's doing this. And I think the opportunity to get out of your circle and see that there's so many other people out there, young Christians, right, battling out just like you, you know what I mean, trying their best, going through some of the similar things that you're going through, and yet here they are, hands lifted, singing the songs, worshiping. And I think seeing that at a young age was just very powerful and encouraging to just, I remember this one moment, there was a song that was a worship song that was in at the time, and they like stopped the music, music went real low, the singers like dropped their mics, and you just heard everyone lifting their voice and singing and shouting out, and just hearing that, right, there was no music, no band playing, there were no microphones, it was just people's like real authentic, worship and just crying out to God was something that was just moving, that again, it just confirms the idea of you not being alone, even though it may feel so lonely, Yeah,
and I think that, because I had mentioned earlier, like there was two things that I kind of don't love as much. And it's that sometimes we forget to bring all that good stuff we just finished speaking about, that we finished doing the last 2-3 days, back home with you. Yeah. So it's kind of like, instead of everyone like taking on the mindset of, I need to bring this back with me. So that same enthusiasm that I had in reference to worship, I need to apply that in my everyday life. That same enthusiasm that I had in fellowship and connecting with people, I need to apply that to my regular life. And it's like the minute we get in the car or the bus, we check out. And I think that that's the downside of it sometimes as well, which is that you need to bring that with you. You need to carry that with you and throughout the year, because that's the purpose of it. It's kind of like, why did you fill your tank to then on your way home put a leak in it so that it falls out as you're making your way back home? No, you want to have that reserve with you and then not overextend that, but also extend that into your everyday life as well.
Yeah, and I think that's very important because there are people who use camps or retreats as kind of like an escape.
Yeah.
You know, it's an escape from their everyday life. It's an escape from their family. It's an escape from their, church people or responsibilities, whatever. It's an escape. And it's good to look at it, as a way of I'm escaping for the weekend, but escaping for the weekend in hopes of coming back better.
Yes.
Not escaping for the weekend to leave my struggles, problems, and issues at home, and then Monday night when I come back or Sunday night when I come back, I'm just entering right back into it, and it's just like business as usual, and that's the hard part because I've definitely been there where you're on a weekend and you feel so encouraged. You're like, God, I trust you. God, I believe in you. God, I know you're there for me, right? And then you go back to your issue that Monday, that Sunday night, and it's like, God, where are you? And it's just, there's a different level of closeness that you have when you're at a retreat or at a camp than when you go back to your environment. So it's like the hope is and the goal is that when you go on these retreats, when you go on these camp weekends and, you're with your church and you're, gathering together with the purpose to just get closer to God, the goal is to have a great time, but to build and strengthen yourself. So when you go back, you are able then to fight those things that you're struggling with, to combat with those things that are coming against you. And hopefully when you're in the midst of those moments of, anxiety or depression or sadness or, not being able to sleep at night and all of those things, you go back to that camp moment. You go back to that worship moment that really stuck out to you. And you remember that same God that was there with me that camp weekend is with me now in this room, is with me now in my struggle. And it sounds so much easier said than done, and that's the whole thing, that it really does take work when you come back from a retreat like that. It really does take work to try to apply everything that you learned and everything that you experienced over the weekend.
And I also think that it takes a village. Because we're each individually fighting our own personal battles. But when you come back from a really awesome weekend, and as a group, you make the effort to check on each other, or as a group, you make an effort to send it's like simple stuff. Like you start a group chat. And we're like, hey, youth services on Thursday, let's all make sure we're there. Like men's ministry has an outing on Friday. Let's whatever, trying to keep building on the momentum of that. I think that helps. And I think that unfortunately what happens is that everyone then returns to their personal life. Nobody's really checking at each other. Because it's we have our own things that are consuming us as well. But it's all part of the process. Unfortunately, you really do need to learn how to balance, and it happens to us in our regular services. Like you'll go to a Sunday service and it'll be an amazing service. You were floating, you were doing laps around the church, whatever, your thing is. And then you get home that night and it's kind of like sometimes it dissipates a little too quickly, and you don't know how to deal with that. You don't know how to remedy that as well. But I think that that's an important topic, the idea of what do you do in those moments when you're still in the process. There may be a situation where you did go to camp, you felt God, you did receive word from God as well, but you're still in the middle of whatever. You're still dealing with anxiety, or you're still dealing with financial woes, or you're still having relationship problems, or you're out of a job, because there may be a miracle where you come home and there's a job waiting for you, but then 9 times out of 10 you maybe gotta still do the job search. So what do you do when you're in the middle of all that mess? And recently Blanca released her full album. She's been releasing singles here and there.
Podcasting 101. Did y'all catch that transition?
Nice, right?
Seamless. Continue.
Listen, I won an award for that back in middle school. And we've covered one of her songs, New Day, and and finally the album is out, and one of the songs on her album is called In the Middle, where she speaks about the idea of someone going through the transition of something hard, traumatic. We can imply based off like what we know about her life, like what specifically is being spoken about in that song, but that's a song that can apply to anybody that is going through a spiritual, mental, emotional transition where they're still in the middle of it. Like, there's someone who believes in God, there's someone who has faith in God, but is still in the middle of the feelings and the emotions and everything that the messy part of it is as well. So
yeah, I mean, she released her album, The Heartbreak and The Healing, and that song In the Middle, right, is like in the middle of the album. And it's one of those songs where, like you said, it's honest. Yeah. And that's one of the things we always talk about, the idea of we need transparency and honesty in Christian music and, preachings where it's not like this is the wish in a perfect world. This is what you would be saying when your house burned down with everything in it.
Yeah.
God be praised, Imagine. But unfortunately, that's not sometimes the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
You're hurt. You're broken. Yeah. You're questioning God. Write a song about that. Speak about that, And I think she did a great job in doing that, where especially when it's an album called The Heartbreak and The Healing, those are two opposites, yes. Right? Two different seasons of life, and you go through that process where you're probably not heartbroken anymore, but you're not healed anymore. You're not, as bad as you were before, but you're not where you want to be, and you may feel like, God, I'm in the middle, and it's in that middle where I feel like we are challenged, we are questioned. I feel like we doubt, we worry. That's where we're hit with, God, is this even worth it? You know what I mean? And it's crazy because we're not where we were. You know what I mean? Like we're not, where in that dark place where at one time, we dwelled there and that was our home and it was horrible and we've made progress, but it's almost like, God, this progress isn't enough. God, this isn't, everything. You know what I mean? There's more that I want. There's more healing. There's more wholeness that I need, right? And, for her, she was speaking about a divorce that she went through, right? And, just the struggle of trying to see God in the midst of your issue and in the midst of your problem when it seems like, God, you say everything works for good. I don't see it. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's being in the middle where God promises you something and it's like, God, everything's actually going in reverse. It's actually getting worse. God, what do I do? Yeah. You waiting for God to speak to you, waiting for God to give you, some guidance or direction, and you're not getting it. You're stuck in the middle. So what do you do when you are in the middle? And I feel like a lot of us feel that we have to wait to get out of that place, and get out and be healed and be whole before we can even talk about it. And then it's like, if no one is talking about it and no one is talking about what it looks like to be in the middle as a Christian, as, a husband, as a brother, as a daughter, as a father, a mother, a pastor, then we're all stuck in our own little middles, thinking we're all alone.
Yes.
And not realizing that there are a lot of people out there who are not where they were, but they're not where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think that you took the words right out of my mouth, because that's what I was thinking. I was like, this is the part of the Christian walk that no one likes to speak about, and the reason for that is because it's the messy part. It's the where all the drama is, but it's also the part in your walk where you start to say things and question things about God and have conversations about God that people don't like, that make them feel uncomfortable. Because in the middle is where, if you're someone that's looking for healing, believes that God can heal you, but at that moment do not feel like God is your healer. And to say that and to speak that is like, people are like, that's blasphemous. How dare you say something like that? Like one of the lyrics in her song is, someday I know this won't be as painful. Someday I'm gonna say God is faithful, but I can't find the words. It's not that simple because I'm right in the middle. So the idea of understanding, like, God is faithful. I get that God is faithful. Do I feel like that at this moment? I don't. I really do not. I cannot say at this moment that I feel like God is being faithful with me in the middle of this process. But saying that and confessing that really like makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it could, because I feel like it makes you seem like a hypocrite.
Yes.
It makes you seem like, well, aren't you trusting God?
Yeah.
Isn't God your everything? Isn't God your provider and your savior? And it makes you feel, again, like I am living out this thing. I am saying this with my mouth, but my heart doesn't believe it. I can't let people know like what's really happening in there. You know what I mean?
And I think that these are things that people actually do say and do feel. Like we've had conversations like this as well, where like sometimes we like say like, I believe God can do it, but do I feel that he's doing anything? And no, I don't. I feel upset, or I feel angry, or I feel mad, or whatever the emotion or the feeling that you're feeling at that moment.
And there are people that can handle that.
Yes.
And there are people that can't.
True. What do you mean, like hearing somebody say that?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
like
obviously.
If they heard us say that, that would be
But you have to, that's a whole different conversation, because then there's wisdom that comes with that as well. You can't really share that with everyone. You're not going to take a part on a kid service and be like, guys,
one day in your life,
you're going to need to know.
You're going to feel like God has left you.
Like, no, that's not what there's wisdom that comes with that.
The valley of the shadow of death.
But even in like circles with people, or even with like leadership, or even there's a way to speak on these things from a place, whether you want to speak on it in a place from testimony, or pastors and leaders should have the forethought to really like speak on these things as well, because I feel like these aren't the topics that I grew up listening about. Not one time can I think of a recollection of someone speaking about like that middle process. What does it feel like when that you've seen God do great things in your life before, you've seen God perform certain miracles, but in that very moment where you find yourself in life, in that process, you're not seeing it. So because you're not seeing it, it's hard for you to declare that he has already done that in your life. I have heard preachings about how you need to speak by faith. Absolutely. I've heard about, you need healing, declare God as your healing. You need a financial breakthrough, declare God as your financial advisor. I don't know. What do you say? But it's a jump. It's like there's a lot that happens in the middle of that we so gracefully like run by and not give the attention that it needs, which is that we are humans that are having human experiences that are trying to connect with a spiritual being. Like we believe God is spiritual, and we believe that we have a duality about us, which is that we live here but we're not of here. We believe in God and the spiritual part of that as well. But as a human, life can suck sometimes, and because of that, you have to like really work through those emotions. But those are the things that people don't like to talk about. And
one of the things that I really like about her album, right, is that she ends it with her song The Healing, right, which we've mentioned and we've spoken about it before. I love the song because I love the way it's worded, because it's called The Healing, but in the lyrics of the song, it's not saying, God, you healed me. God, I'm healed. God, thank you for the healing. It says, you're healing me. And that is kind of the hook that keeps repeating. So it's almost like, even in her perspective, right, and her mindset and what she's putting down and putting out there, right, for the world to hear and be all up in it, you know what I mean, in her business, she's also declaring, God, like, this is a process. Healing is a process, and he is healing me. And I think oftentimes we await for a moment where God comes through for us, and it all happens in that moment. God can do that, and God has done that. Do I think that that's everybody's story? No. I think there are moments where your healing may take you years, and each day that passes and each moment that passes, you're getting a little bit stronger, you're getting a little bit wiser, you're getting a little bit better, you're growing more, you're understanding more. But now, are you completely healed at this moment? No, but I'm way better than what I was. So it's even possible that in the middle where we find ourselves, where we feel like God isn't coming through, or we just feel like we're not getting it and understanding it, it is possible that God is slowly healing us, even through that experience, And I love, how she just phrased that song, because again, we will hear songs declaring God as our healer, how God has healed us, but it's rare the time that you hear someone say, God, I need your healing, and it's not here yet. God, I'm going through it, but I trust that you are healing me even through all of the uncertainty and even in the middle.
And I really do have to give props to not only Blanca, but to a lot of worshipers and leaders and just people in general that are really tapping into the balance of vulnerability in Christian walk. I think that for a really long time, there's been like a lot of focus on like the spirituality of it, like giving God honor, giving God glory, worshiping God, which are all important things. But like I mentioned before, like also then not addressing the humanness of what it means to be a Christian that is trying to live a Christ-like life, and we've been seeing this wave of like honest worship, honest people that are doing a really good job in balancing it, because it's like you said before, like you can't really just go out there and just start spewing stuff randomly. It's like, it reminds me of like moments where like I've been in a service and somebody's leading worship, and before they start they just say something random like, like, I'm really tired and I want to be here today, let's sing this worship song. It's kind of like, wait a minute, get to a nice place, which is, right. But then I walked in and I don't know, lie, right. No, not lie. Well, like, that's not how you start a worship session, like, so that moment of honesty was maybe true to that person, and they really did feel that way. They felt tired. They had a long day. They didn't really want to be there, but you can't say those things like that. Like, there's this level of wisdom, because you also don't want to hurt people. You also don't want to confuse people. Like, I may be able to have a conversation with someone and say, oh, you know what, I'm just really upset at God today, and they will understand that. I have that somebody else hears that and they won't. They'll look at me differently. They'll judge me, and that concept is not something that they can compute or understand, because that's not what they're at in their walk with the Lord. So there is a wisdom that comes with being able to be honest about your walk, but knowing that you can't always have those conversations with just anybody. And
I think also knowing when it's time to speak on it. Yes. Right. Because I'm sure for her, she wrote a lot of these songs. She was saying, some of them during the pandemic and in those moments, but I'm sure the minute she wrote her first song after going through her experience, it wasn't like, I'm putting this out right now. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, there's also some time where, you need to sit with that truth. Yes. And you need to sit with, what you're putting out there, whether it's art or, whatever you're speaking. You need to sit with it for a minute. There are moments where maybe something like, this is for now. But then there are other times where it's like, God, you're dropping something in me, right? You're putting something in me. Let me know when it's the right time to talk about it, go forth with it, put it out. Because when it's the right time in the process, you will feel good as you speak on these things, right? And those who listen to you, I believe just the message will be that more powerful, So if you find yourself in the middle,
go listen to Blanca album. No.
Go listen to her album, The Heartbreak and The Healing. But two, you are not alone.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I believe that you'd probably be surprised to know that probably your pastor's in the middle, your youth leaders in the middle, right? Your parents are probably in the middle, and it's just not something that is just openly talked about. But trust God in that place, give him that chance to do something and work in your life. And it's just that moment where it's always the fear and the worry of giving up right before we get to that place. Yes. You know what I mean? Where it's like, man, I tried so hard for so many years not to give up, to do my best. And right where I'm just that close, so close to that breakthrough, or so close to that clarity of what I'm asking God for, I give up and I miss it, And it's one of those things where we don't want that to be our story.
No, we don't want it to be your story either, So at the end of the day, whatever you take away from this, just learn to be encouraged and to understand that you are not alone. And the middle may be messy. The middle may be horrible. It may be tiresome. But at the end of the day, it's called the middle for a reason, because it's not the end. So thank you for tuning in to today's episode. As always, you can find us on our socials.
Yes, at Facebook and Instagram at God Life Culture Podcast. Subscribe to us wherever you are listening to your podcast right now. Check us out on YouTube and subscribe to us there. You can check out all of our videos and episodes, and definitely you'll be notified when we drop a new episode.
Yeah, so we hope you like the new scenery for today.
Coming straight from Quinepet.
Yes, Shelter Island, all the way at the end of Long Island. If you want to fly us out to any island, we're definitely willing and able to travel. No, but thank you once again for tuning in to the latest episode of the God Life Culture Podcast. That's God Life Culture. Until next time.
See ya.
Bye.